All right, peace family. Welcome to the Sacred Sistahhood show. I'm your host and your big sis, Callie Divine. Today we'll discuss effective boundary setting and the key to a happy, fulfilling relationship. As women, it's important that we prioritize our mental, physical, and emotional health. This means choosing partners who are supportive and respectful of our boundaries. Welcome to the Sacred Sistahhood show. This sacred space is all about empowering women to achieve their best selves in all aspects of life. I'm your host, Callie Divine, and I'm so excited for our in-depth discussions about spirituality, mindfulness, and personal growth. Whether you're just starting your journey or looking to level up, the Sacred Sistahhood show is here to support you every step of the way. Our guest and I share our unique experiences and perspectives to help you unlock your hidden potential, tap into your inner goddess, and find your purpose in life. So sit back, grab a cup of tea or wine, and let's get ready for some good vibes and positive energy. With that being said, it gives me great pleasure to introduce our special guest for today's show. This amazing goddess is an award-winning wellness and relationship coach who has helped countless individuals triumph over adversity and overcome trauma, just as she did during her childhood. She is also an acclaimed author with 2 important books to her name. She's well known for her empowering, holistic, spiritual, and self-confidence enhancing seminars, programs, and presentations for women on self-care and healthy relationships. The Wall Street Journal, the New York Post, Huffington Post, MSN, the New York State Senate, and the Emmy-winning talk show Fresh Outlook have all recognized her expertise and ability to help others overcome personal challenges in life. So let us welcome our sister and special guest, Fila Antwine. Welcome, goddess.
Hey, I'm so happy to be here. Thank you for having me, Callie. I'm excited.
Thank you for joining this conversation today. It's a very, very special topic that I thought would be relevant to our audience because it's absolutely relevant to my life and it's relevant to countless other people that I know personally. And that is how to effectively set boundaries and communicate in relationships, and not just your intimate relationships with a husband or spouse or a boyfriend, but also with like family. And that's something that I really, really struggle with like my whole life. So I can't wait to get into this conversation. But before we start, I want to play a little game. And so I'm going to spin this wheel and then I'll tell you exactly what each one of these things mean. All right, so the first one is called romantic relationships. So I'm going to give you a scenario that involves something that you would get into with a spouse, a husband, a boyfriend, girlfriend. And I want you to tell me the best way that you would create a boundary to get out of that situation.
Absolutely.
So
let's go.
All right. So romantic relationships. The name of this one is called the texting dilemma. You're dating someone new and you're really into them. However, they're the type of person who doesn't text very often, and you're the type of person who gets anxious when someone doesn't respond to your messages in a timely manner. How would you communicate your feelings without coming across as needy or clingy?
So I think this is a great question, first of all, because there are a few caveats here that we can like touch on as we answer, right? So first and foremost, recognizing that everyone has different communication styles and we have different levels of communication comfort. So for this individual, myself in this example, right? If for me, I need you to text me back within a certain amount of time to feel comfortable, I simply get to assert that verbally in my communication with my partner. However, I also get to become aware that it may not be something that my partner is used to doing, especially if this is a new relationship. And so a simple way to create, and I wouldn't necessarily say that this is a boundary, right? But a way to create like a relationship requirement in this space would be to simply let your partner know, hey, I know that maybe you're not used to doing things this way. However, when they're done that way, it really makes me feel comfortable and just lets me know that you've received my message. So if you could be more mindful in responding in a more timely manner, that would really be helpful to me. Mm-hmm. Just gentle and direct, because the thing is, when the aggression is there and when the anxiety is there, it's not really about you and your partner in that moment. It's a trauma response based on whatever has happened in the past, so you get to check yourself in that situation.
Well, that's a perfect way for a woman to answer. And I know some people that will answer more of an assertive manner. In an aggressive way that may come off as demeaning or offensive. So if we could just find a gentle way to say it, right? That's what you're saying. It's just a gentle way to say it without necessarily hurting anybody's feelings.
Just gentle and direct, because the thing is, when the aggression is there and when the anxiety is there, it's not really about you and your partner in that moment. It's a trauma response based on whatever has happened in the past, so you get to check yourself in that situation.
Absolutely. Let's give it another spin.
I like this.
All right. Self-care siesta. So the scenario is called the yoga instructor.
Got it.
You've just started attending a new yoga class to help you relax and de-stress. However, the instructor is constantly pushing you to do more advanced poses and make you feel inadequate. How could you tell them to calm down and fall back without offending them?
So the job of the instructor is to push you, right? In any environment, if there is a coach, if there is a teacher, if there is an instructor, their job is to push you past your own limitations and your own boundaries. So being aware of that first and foremost helps you to not personalize the situation and what's happening. And you're not making it a me against them against me type of situation. It's not personal. This is the job of the instructor. However, whenever you feel uncomfortable, whenever you don't feel like you are being given the space to explore what you're doing, you have a right and you have an obligation to, again, assert that verbally. I'm a New Yorker, so we have a very direct way of speaking and dealing with things. And I know you're from Philly, so it's very similar, right? Us East Coasters are kind of like super direct. But for those who maybe aren't as self-assured when it comes to advocating for yourself, you can simply say to someone, if I need your help, I'll ask.
That's simple and sweet.
Simple as that. If I need your help, I'll ask for it.
I like that.
But I'm okay right now. I'm figuring it out. I'm exploring. If I need your help, I'll ask for it. And then that creates a boundary between you and that individual that respects your needs in that moment, but also honors their role as an instructor or a helper or a guide in that space as well.
I like that. I love these answers. I love them. And they're all real life scenarios that I've probably experienced once or twice in my life.
And so it's okay. Not only is it okay, but it's necessary for you to know that you can speak up so that you don't hold it in and then explode.
That's true. That's passive aggression, right?
There you go.
All right, last spin.
Let's see what we get.
All right. The last one is technology troubles. So the scenario is called the group chat glitch. You're part of a large group chat with friends, but one of them tends to send excessive messages throughout the day, often derailing the topic, sharing irrelevant memes, and sending endless selfies. How could you set a boundary with them without coming across as rude or hurting their feelings?
So when we're in friend groups, we have a responsibility to be ourselves and to be honest. And so sometimes you might have a friend who's being themselves, which could just be monopolizing the conversation, taking over the space, making it all about me. And that's okay, right? That's who he or she may be. As the friend on the other side of that, your responsibility now gets to be you being honest and simply saying to your friend, all right, Cal, we see you cute today, but we don't need all your selfies in. You can make it very playful. You can make it very loving, but be honest and be direct. Again, not personalizing anything because it's not a personal attack. People are generally not trying to do anything to you. They are simply trying to meet their own emotional needs. And so if you just make people aware that what they're doing is taking up too much space or taking up too much time, they'll generally adjust, right? So as a friend, I think you get to acknowledge your friend and what it is that they're looking for from the group, but then also bring them back, like I said, in a really simple, playful way. Like, I see your hair is done, or I see you got your new outfit on. You cute girl, but let's get back to the vacation topic or whatever it is that we're talking about. And you should have a level of comfort and rapport with the people that you call friends.
Right, that's very true. I could play that game all day. I literally love your answers. Love all of them. But let's get into the conversation a little bit. So,
Okay.
First and foremost, could you define exactly what a boundary is?
Sure. So from my perspective, and for the women that I work with, they are accomplished and successful and ambitious women who are used to going after the things that they want and the things that they need. And so they are women who understand that there's a time and place for advocacy. And when it comes to talking about personal boundaries within the scope of that, it is simply about you recognizing what is needed at the time, at the place, and in the space that you're currently in. Right? So what do I need that's going to allow me to show up at my best? What do I need that's going to help me feel safe and secure? What do I need in this relationship to recognize, know, and feel that my partner is participating as well? Once you know what you need, you also can then figure out the things that you don't need or that you don't want or that don't work towards those end goals. And in that middle space is where you begin to recognize what your boundaries should be, right? And so a boundary is a simple requirement for you to be able to feel safe, to feel soft, and to feel seen within a space or an environment.
I love that. Okay. So, speaking of relationships, would you be able to give a few examples of healthy boundaries in, let's just say, a intimate relationship with a spouse or boyfriend, girlfriend type of situation, and then also a healthy boundary or examples of healthy boundaries that we may see within family structure?
Sure. So let's talk about the intimate and the romantic spaces first, right? Because I think that kind of can be easier, because when we're dealing with family, there's a layering of things that come up. But in the dating stage, for instance, because there are different levels when we're in relationships in different stages. And so a very early boundary when you're in the beginning of a dating stage could simply be like, you might just have a no touch or a no kissing kind of boundary with people that you haven't been in connection with for a certain amount of time. And that might be something that's a hard stop for you, right? No touching, no kissing on first dates. Simple boundary. And you don't always have to explicitly say it, but if the conversation and the time comes up, you get to express that to the other person in the situation. And I want to be really clear that your boundaries are for you, first and foremost, right? It's a conversation that you get to have with yourself, and then you're able to express it to others. If we are past the dating stage and in a relationship, another simple boundary that might be in place is that it might be like, no yelling. If we have a disagreement, we're not cursing, throwing things. We get to communicate with each other, have adult responsible conversations, and if someone gets too loud or too aggressive, then you assert that boundary, right? You initiate that boundary and you say, hey, remember we said this is not how we're going to communicate. And those are kind of two different ways in relationships where you can have a boundary, right? One can be unspoken, you know it, you hold on to it if you need to, and the other one is something that's explicitly expressed to your partner. Is that clear?
Very important. Yes. And two very important ones, yes.
And then when it comes to family, family is so intricate and those relationships are so much more complex. So I want to just acknowledge that it's not always easy to set personal boundaries in your familial relationship spaces, especially because we are most often unconsciously building connections with our family members. because you're born into the family. So this is your mother, this is your father, this is your sister, brother, auntie, uncle, cousin, all of that. It's not like meeting someone and having a conversation about what your requirements are and what your boundaries are. So you're kind of figuring it out as you grow and as you learn your family members, and oftentimes as your boundaries are crossed, and then you recognize, oh, I don't like how that feels, right? I don't want this to happen again. And so the thing to do when it comes to family is to recognize when something has occurred that doesn't feel good to you, so that you acknowledge that for yourself. And then if you are able to have a mature conversation with your family member, you get to express to them and say, you know, I really didn't like how it felt when this happened. Not, I didn't like what you did to me, or you did this, or you made me feel, because that becomes accusatory. So it's about taking ownership of your own feelings when it comes to family relationships and saying, this is how I felt when this incident occurred, and I think that there's a better way for us to go about that, or I think that there's a better way for us to address that. So moving forward, how about you come talk to me instead of telling my mama all my business, right? How about you tell me before calling auntie and uncle and having the discussion with them? And then simply allowing your family member to respond in whatever way they choose to, and then you moving accordingly after that.
Now, that is, I'm assuming that would be if you had a pretty healthy, functioning relationship with certain family members. But I think we can all attest that we have certain family members that are just toxic to our mental health. So what are some common challenges that people may face when trying to set those boundaries with toxic family members that just aren't really trying to hear what you have to say, but they're just they're just there to use you for, you know, whatever they could get out of you? How do you have those type of conversations, or do you just isolate and just leave them all alone altogether?
So initially you want to attempt to have the conversation, right? You want to attempt to have a healthy conversation. If these are individuals who are not operating from a healthy mentality or a healthy mindset around relationships, you're going to come up against a brick wall, because they are either going to gaslight you, or they're going to ignore you, or they're going to minimize your emotional needs in the situation. And so if that's something that happens, that's simply information for you. That's information that, oh, you don't respect my boundaries, right? You can't respect my boundaries. And so then there has to be a consequence. If you don't respect and can't respect and aren't willing to acknowledge my boundaries, then that means that I now have to enforce the boundary. So there's a difference between setting a boundary and then enforcing the boundary. The setting is saying, hey, I really would appreciate if you lowered your voice when you speak to me, because maybe your yelling triggers a certain emotional response for me, and that doesn't feel good. That's setting the boundary. You're saying this is what the boundary is, and you're laying it out. But if that individual is still yelling, still rude, still disrespectful, still gaslighting, still minimizing, then there comes the time for you to enforce the boundary. So enforcing the boundary says, I've already set my boundary and told you, right, that this is not what I will accept. And so if you are not respecting that, then here's what's going to happen. And that's when you have to move into the this is what's going to happen stage of the relationship, which may mean isolation, which may mean disconnection, which may mean limiting your access or shifting around them. You get to decide what that consequence is, what that additional variable is going to be when it's time to enforce the boundary. Because nobody's obligated to respect you or your boundaries except for you.
Now, communication is very important, and you've been saying that the whole time. You need to have first establish a healthy communication, and I'm even at fault, and I think that a lot of us may be at fault for not expressing our boundaries and holding on to just all of the stuff that just has bothered us about, you know, certain people crossing our boundaries, and then we just let it all out one day and it's just a negative outcome, and you end up just ghosting the person. You just end up just isolating, and they probably never even know what it was that they did to cause the issue in the first place. So that's very important that you mentioned. You have to have express yourself in the first place and have a conversation and communicate effectively. That's definitely the first step, even if it's a hard conversation. And let me just ask you really quick, what if that is a challenging conversation to have? What advice would you give to have and address a conversation that could just be too hard for a person to have?
So there might be some steps that need to be taken in the way of self-confidence and personal grounding first, right? You have to have the wherewithal and the strength to be able to identify your needs and then advocate for yourself in asserting those needs. So sometimes some folks are not ready. They just don't have the confidence to speak up for themselves. They just don't have the personal strength to speak up for themselves. They haven't built resilience to be able to maneuver around those places and spaces. That's why self-work is so important, right? That's why you have to have a support system, a coach, a therapist, a mentor, some place where you can go that is healthy to help you create a foundation so that you can stand on that foundation when it's time to advocate for yourself. And so if you aren't at the place emotionally, mentally, or psychologically where you're able to have the conversation, then you need to seek support from a professional or a trusted confidant who can help you find or create that internal strength so that you can begin to have the conversations.
That's a good one. I like that answer so much. And I think that it is very much harder, though, when you're dealing with like maybe parents, for example, because they're always going to look at you as their child, right? And when you try to set those boundaries with them, they're always going to look at you like you're that 15-year-old that really doesn't know what they're talking about. So it gets hard. Even if you have that confidence, it's really hard to step to your parents. And well, for me, it is. Sometimes it's very hard for me to step to my parents and tell them that this is not okay. This is not a line that I want us to cross. And those conversations are very challenging, especially when they are just not trying to hear you as an adult, you know.
Absolutely. And just like your parents are going to see you as their child until you assert yourself, for a lot of adults, you still look at your parent as that authority figure even when you become an adult. So you have to shift the way that you see your parents, right? There does come a time where you and your parents become equals. And I know, not I think, but I know in the Black community and in communities of color specifically, we are not necessarily allowed to ever ascend to the level of adulthood that our parents are on, right? And anytime you advocate for yourself or assert yourself or try to create a boundary, you being disrespectful. Right? This is not how you're supposed to talk to your parents. This is rude. This is disrespectful. You ain't grown. But I am grown. I am. And so I'm grown like you are grown, and we get to have grown conversations. So putting yourself, like I said, in a space where you're being supported to be able to recognize that your parents are simply flawed human beings as well. And that you get to see them as humans and not just as mom and dad when it comes to you standing up for yourself, taking up for yourself, and advocating for yourself.
Now that hit home a lot, because some challenges that I've had to deal with in my life personally. Now let's bring it back around to intimate and romantic relationships. How would you say that communicating one's boundaries will help prevent relationship problems like codependency or controlling behavior?
So in the beginning, that's the most ideal time to have conversations about what your requirements are, right? I don't believe in having expectations. I believe in having requirements. And I advocate that for my clients as well. Your expectations are a conversation that you're having with yourself. Nobody else knows what you expect. You're showing up to the environment, showing up in the relationship with your expectations based on your past and your ideal situation. But requirements are things that we base on our expectations and the actual experience that we're having. So in the beginning of the relationship, you want to have these conversations about what your requirements are to be in a relationship with someone, what your requirements are to be a partner to someone, what your requirements are to become a spouse or a parent, all of these things, which again means that you have to have had internal conversations with yourself to be clear on these things first. And so if you are in that position and coming from a healthy space, you'll be able to have the conversations early on. Most people are not operating from that level of self-awareness or self-assurance. So we skip that process in the beginning. We don't communicate clearly. We try to morph ourselves into who we think that the other person wants us to be so we could get chose. And then we get chose, right? And now we've been chosen and we're in this, but that's what it is. Everybody want to be chose, right? And once we're chosen and then we choose that partner, we get in the relationship and our real selves begin to start showing up. And now I'm not getting what I want. You're not getting what you want. We're frustrated. That is the second most ideal time to begin the communication process. Okay, listen, maybe we moved a little too fast. Let's have a conversation now because we're more comfortable. We're not pretending as much. Let's have a conversation. What is it that you really want here? And I'm going to share with you what I really want here. And there are always going to be opportunities within the relationship to sit down and say, okay, let's talk because this is not working for me or it's not working for you or it's creating conflict. But you have to have the wherewithal to take advantage of those places of opportunity. And the only way that you'll be able to do that is if you understand what your needs are and you are self-aware and have the self-confidence to show agency.
Now you say it's not expectations, it's more of requirements. Would you also consider that as just setting a certain level of standard for yourself? Is that pretty much interchangeable in your opinion?
So it's similar, yes. I think when it comes to having a standard, that's an overarching thing, right? That's a general thing, that this is the level that I want to operate on. Communication and trust and healthy relationships and having boundaries, that's the standard of relationship that I want. Then your requirements are the specifics inside of your standard.
Okay,
here's what I require, right? So if communication is part of the standard, then that means that one of the requirements is that we have a meeting at least once or twice a month to talk about how we feel and what we've been going through individually and collectively, right? And that's a non-negotiable. That's required here because I need to know what you need so that I'm meeting your needs, and I need you to know what I'm needing so that you know where you fit in and all of that.
I hope everybody is listening because you were dropping jewels on this episode. I have a lot of acquaintances that struggle with their relationships because we often, like you said, we rush into it without speaking our needs first. So then when you get more tightly involved, then you realize your expectations are not on the same level, and that's when we start having conflict. So what are some common obstacles that people face when trying to create and maintain boundaries in a relationship?
So if you did not begin the relationship from that kind of place with healthy conversation, you're simply going to get resistance from your partner, right? Not because they're out to get you, not because they're trying to hurt you, but because you switching the game up in the middle of things. And it's just like, whoa, this is not how we do things. This is not what I signed up for. Who said, why do I have to tell you what I feel and what I think, and why do we need to talk about all these things, especially when those feelings are big? So you're initially going to get resistance from your partner simply because it's something different in the middle of the game. Right? You're changing the rules here. I don't know if I still want to play if we're not going to keep playing the way that we were, even if the way that we're playing is not creating a win for any of us, because human beings are simply creatures of habit. And the brain is always going to take the path of least resistance.
Yep.
What's easiest for me here? I'm going to do what's easiest. And so you'll get that resistance from your partner initially, and that's okay. It's just them saying, I'm scared of doing something new. I'm afraid to try something different. And so you get to be patient in that space. After the initial resistance, when the two of you now are having the communication and starting, what you may then encounter is frustration on both sides, right? Because we're new in communicating this way. So maybe you're not hearing me the right way. Maybe I'm not expressing myself the right way. And so there'll be some frustration on each end with one or both of us feeling like we're not being heard in the way that we want to. And that's normal and okay as well, because we're changing our communication strategy. So that early resistance and that in the middle frustration, those are signs that you are communicating and you are moving in a different direction. So know that it's normal, but also know that those are moments to kind of take a break and really connect with each other in on a deeper level. So that it's not just about what I need, what you need, but let's take a moment and let's kind of just be in this space, and then let's come back.
Now, I wanted to give you an example of how this actually relates to my life. When me and my husband were first dating, we spent 100% of our time together, doing everything together, right? Right. So when we finally moved in together and we got settled in, and I wanted to get back to myself and, do the things that I enjoy doing alone, that did not go well. It did not go well. And that's because I did not communicate that in the beginning of the relationship, that I like my alone time. I like to be able to sit with myself, and I just like to be alone. And that's a perfect example of how if you don't create it in the beginning, it can create frustration and resistance. So I went through it myself.
And it's because you send one message and then you change the message, right? So if your message in the beginning was, you have all of my time, right? You get to get all of me, all of the time, whenever you want. And now you're like, oh, nah, this is for me. You only get 20% now. So it's like, wait, this is not how we do things. So it's that resistance and that frustration that comes up.
Now, let's say someone is successful at creating those boundaries initially. How can those boundaries evolve over time?
So you're evolving over time. You're always evolving as a human being. You're always changing. You're always growing. And so sometimes you may recognize that a boundary that you put in place previously isn't needed anymore, right? And you might say, well, you know what? That used to be something that I wasn't open to, but I want to try it now, or I'm okay with that. And you simply just let your partner know when those things have changed. And you first acknowledge with yourself and give yourself permission to grow out of your previous mindset. And if perhaps there is a boundary that needs to be put in place that previously wasn't in place, it's the same way that we talked about earlier, acknowledging the previous dynamic and saying to your partner, I know you're not used to me being this way or doing this thing. And maybe I should have expressed it before, but I wasn't clear on it then. But I recognize now that this is something I need. So in moving forward, I want you to be able to operate with me in this way.
What advice would you give to someone that just struggles to set boundaries, period, and just has a hard time saying no because they always want to please the other person? I sometimes fall in this category.
The people pleaser?
Yep.
I actually have I have quite a few clients who tend to be people pleasers because, like I said, right, the women that I work with are highly accomplished and intelligent and ambitious and successful. And they're primarily Black women or women of color. And so for us, we've learned that the way to be a good woman is to do for others. So the more that you do for others, the more that you give to others, the more that you please others, the more validated you become as a woman and as a good woman, right? And then it becomes challenging and difficult to separate that ideology when you are trying to figure out who you are and what you want. And so it really limits you in being able to simply assert your own needs, because for most women in that case, you don't even know what your own needs are, because you've only been doing things for the purpose of being validated by others, for the purpose of pleasing others. So the first thing that you really want to do is to take a step back and ask yourself, what is it that I want in a relationship, in a partnership, in my own life? What are the things that bring me joy and bring me peace and please me, right? And how can I start pleasing myself more? Because pleasure is such a powerful healing mechanism. If you start giving yourself more pleasure, more moments of personal pleasure, more physical pleasure, more sensory pleasure, and just begin to feel good internally more without someone else in your space or someone else required to be there, you'll become more self-aware, you'll become more self-assured, and you'll start to be able to recognize the things that don't please you and don't feel good to you anymore. And that will create a foundation for you to start figuring out what boundaries you want in place. And then it is always beneficial to have support. I'm a coach. I'm always going to say, get someone in your corner, right? A coach, a therapist, a mentor, a counselor, someone who can help give you real tools and real strategies that you can implement in your life based on your specific lifestyle and life circumstances.
So what would be a few red flags for someone who you share your boundaries and requirements with, but they just keep on cross them? What would be a red flag showing you that they just don't care?
Well, if they keep crossing it, girl, that's not a red flag. That's a whole red light, stop sign, detour, right? Construction site happening. If they're not respecting your boundaries, then
that's when you enforce it, right?
That's when you have to enforce the consequence. And the consequence may be, I can't be in this relationship anymore. The consequence may be, you're not allowed in my space anymore, right? So, for example, we talked about the family dynamic and how it's difficult with parents. Often parents have been toxic and abusive to their children, and they don't know that, right? Only the child knows what kind of mother a mother was or what kind of father a father was. And so when a child then says to a mother or father, the way that you parented me scarred me, the way that you parented me hurt me, right? The way that you parented me minimized me, and you are still operating in those same ways with me today as an adult. So this has to stop, this has to stop, and this has to stop in order for me not to feel minimized, in order for this not to be a toxic dynamic. And if that parent says, well, that's your experience, but it's not mine, that's a red flag, right? It's not a full stop, but it's an indication, oh, they're not hearing me, right? That's your experience, not mine. Of course it's not yours, because you was the mama. I was the child. I'm telling you what my experience was. So whenever you assert a boundary and you are dismissed in some way, that is a red flag that individual may not be able to accept it, right? If you assert even a desire, before we even are talking about like full-scale boundaries, we simply generally share our desires with people. I would love to be able to do this thing or have that thing. And if someone minimizes your desires, that's also a red flag, because it then indicates that they probably won't respect your personal boundaries because they don't have the capacity to let you show up in your fullness. If I can't express my visions and my dreams and my desires and what I want for myself, and you don't accept that, then that is a red flag to indicate that you may also be someone who won't respect my boundaries. Right? So it's really the things that come before the full boundary conversation. And that's why it's so important to listen to what people say. And women, we ain't quiet enough. Like sometimes we need to just shut up Let other people speak so you can hear them and feel them and see those red flags come up on their own without having to look for them.
That was a conversation that came up in my prior episode as well. We need to just practice silence and active listening.
Yeah, you're more powerful when you are still.
Yeah, that seems to be a common theme, so I hope everybody is listening. Now, I wish we can continue this conversation all day. I really admire and respect your expertise.
Likewise,
would you Thank you. Would you be able to share with the audience where we can find you on social media, as well as some of the coaching programs that you may provide?
Sure. So you can find me on TikTok at She is Fila. My name is Fila Antwine. You can also go to my website at filaantwine.com. But I am She is Fila across all platforms, and that's SHEISFILA. My coaching baby, my primary program is Sacred Queen Academy, which is a holistic program that takes women from facing fear to finding freedom. And it's about experiencing the joy in your relationship journey, no matter where you are, right? In that process, whether you're single, dating, married, divorced, widowed, you still get to experience love and experience joy and experience ease and peace and passion. And so that's my primary goal. And at the top of our pillars, it's femininity consciousness. So I believe that women are able to experience such a beautiful life when we are connected with our divine feminine energy, and when we allow ourselves to operate from that awareness, and when we unleash our femininity. So I currently have a masterclass that I am offering, and it is called Fierce Femininity Unleashed. We are going to really quick. Yes, Fierce Femininity Unleashed, and it is how to unlock the power of your femininity, to live in love, to create career success, and to really operate in the reality of your ideal desires, because you do deserve to have what you desire. And once we are able to fiercely unleash our femininity, we'll be able to really have such ease in creating the type of life environments and lifestyles that we want. It is a 2-hour masterclass, so we are going to be in there together, connecting, learning, vibing, and honing into our sacred femininity.
That's amazing. I have to go check my schedule. I want to definitely join in on that class.
Yes, I'll send you the link, and you can send it out to your followers as well.
Absolutely. Also, do you have any special offers that you would like to share with the audience?
So I do have summer coaching that's available as well. So the Fierce Femininity Unleashed Masterclass is a great opportunity for you to get your feet wet. It's a low financial investment as far as it goes for coaching. And then on the back of that, if you love the experience there and want to learn more, I also have my Sacred Queendom membership, which you can get access to right now. And for your audience and for your viewership, we have like a special payment plan that's been set up for that. And so they can come to the masterclass, and then they'll get all the information on how to join the Queendom if they feel like what they gain in the masterclass resonates with them.
Awesome. I have to check that out as well. My goodness.
Yes.
But thank you so much for sharing your time and your wisdom with us. I can tell you are very experienced in your field, and you have lots of expertise, and I can't wait to actually check out some of your programs as well.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. And hopefully we can keep in contact and collaborate in the future.
Absolutely. And I hope that you come to the masterclass, girl, because we're going to be going in.
Absolutely.